Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We just want to take some time to engage on this new space that we're launching this afternoon called Sanaa. And our focus for this afternoon really is about learning from practice. My name is Irene Chege. I'm from Twaweza Communications. Twaweza is hosting this CUG forum. It's actually a Creative Economy Working Group forum. And the Creative Economy Working Group forum is really just a group of creative sector organizations that work towards just creating a healthy policy environment for the creative sector to thrive. So as part of our activities, we have learning forums and dialogues for the purposes of, policy advocacy, capacity development, and so on. And so this afternoon, we just wanted to engage around the subject of learning from practice, and there'll be just a whole panel discussion around that. But just talking about Sanaa, those who may have interacted with the Creative Economy Working Group before do know that we have our Bunifu platform where we promote some of the things that I've mentioned: policy advocacy work, capacity development work, and so on. And that's just a creative sector information resource that we have, wabunifu.org. And as part of that, we are starting like a page on Wabunifu that focuses on Sanaa, which is really a learning space, an online learning space for artists. And we want to learn from each other. And so we'll be sharing videos from different artists who have been, who are really part of the sector, whether they are upcoming or established. They are creative sector practitioners, and they'll just be sharing their experiences of learning, of developing skills, of getting their product and their skill and their performances out onto the market, and so on. And we'd be taking time to learn from each other. So that's what we want to launch this afternoon. But it'll be a continuing space. So what we are doing today is just starting off, and then later on we'll be sharing links as we post videos and post content. We'll be sharing that with partners and really across the creative sector network and beyond. So this is what we are doing this afternoon, and we really once again are grateful for your presence here with us this afternoon. So I think I would just like to, that's generally what I wanted to mention, and I'd like to invite now Prof. Kimani Njogu of Twaweza Communications just to take over from here. Remember, we're using the chat. If you have any comments, any questions, you can post those there as the discussion, the panel discussion will be going on. So feel free to have your comments and questions on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I'd like to start our conversation. And really the focus of our conversation is going to be on the whole question of mentorship and creative sector practitioners learning from each other. The idea here is to try and explore whether there, the extent to which there is value in intra-sectoral, learning, and how we could actually enhance that. And so to have this conversation, we will be discussing with Cajetan Boy, Scriptwriters Guild, Peter Mudamba of DocuBox, and Dr. Zippy Okoth, theater and film at Kenyatta University. She's a lecturer at Kenyatta University. And of course, we will be engaging with other people. For those of you who are attending, you can participate, pose your questions, comments on the chat. So I'd like to really start with you, Cajetan, in terms of really trying to understand whether and how you got the skills that you have as a writer of film and the learning moments that you are exposed to. And if you could also share with us the extent to which mentorship played a role in your own growth, Cajetan?
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Well, for me, I would say that mentorship played the bigger role in my developing as a writer, because first of all, I did not study writing or theater or film or any of the arts. I was actually an agricultural engineer, but when I couldn't get a job and I came into the field of the arts, where I realized I had some talent, then it was up to me to figure out how to learn. And there wasn't much opportunity in terms of film schools or schools that teach writing for me to get involved with. So my initial contacts with writing were with in terms of workshops. Then from the workshops, you network and you link up with a mentor who will now hold your hand as you develop in the craft. And so I would say for me, mentorship really played a big part. And I still think does play a big part, because even up to now, I still interact with the mentors when issues arise. So I would say that is really key. I have tried also to go into the space of mentoring other writers, because we realize that, as I said, the formal system doesn't focus very much or specialize very much in certain aspects of production. So to really move forward, you need to get a mentor who will hold your hand and move with you as you go along, because also trends change, styles change, things change. So that is, I would say, was my journey in getting into writing and into mentorship.
Yeah, thanks, Cajetan. When did you start writing for film, or did you start writing for stage? If you could just give us a little background of that.
Yes. I first started writing for stage, and even that was like it came as a by the way, because when I got employed, I was employed as an actor, and as actors, we were doing one act plays. So after a while, we ran out of content, and we were challenged by the project manager. If any of you actors are interested in writing something, go ahead. And that's when I wrote my first piece. And again, even from that point on, I was mentored by, the late James Falkland. He mentored me in terms of techniques and how best to write a script. So yes, I began first as a stage actor, then I became a stage writer, and then there was encouragement from other parties telling me that, well, your scripts look like they can make good movies. And that coupled also with the short lifespan of a stage play, especially in our country, I also decided to learn a bit more about writing for screen, where I was fortunate enough to get a mentor as well.
Yeah, I'll come back to you on because I'm familiar with some of the work you've been doing over the last few years. I'll come back to you on how you are developing the mentorship, program, and how you yourself, considering your own history as a mentee, how you have become a mentor in this interesting journey, Cajetan. So again, Thank you so much. I want now to get to Zippy. As we said, Zippy is a lecturer in film and theater at Kenyatta University, where she is, of course, doing interesting work with students. Zippy Okoth, if you can comment about those moments of learning in your case, in terms of really producing and writing and acting. If you could give us a perspective of that journey, Zippy.
I can't see Dr. Zippy Okoth.
I think that she may have dropped off. Then maybe, Peter, you can take the same question. She may have dropped. I was with her a while back, Zippy, and now she's coming in as Irene. So maybe, Mudamba, you can pick this. In your own case, if you could share with us those learning moments, how did you get into production, film, Were you mentored at any time? Did you start with stage theater? Just give us a perspective so we get to know you a little more.
Well, for me, I think mine also follows a little bit of a similar direction as Cajetan Boy. I worked as an accountant in a finance company, actually Agricultural Finance Corporation, where Cajetan should have been working as an agricultural officer. So I found myself working as an accountant then. And I used to go to the theater to then work a lot more as started off as an actor, then director, then producer. And during those moments is when I started doing lots of voiceovers, and then moved on to spaces where I got involved in TV production. And TV production, both as an actor, then at the same time also got into the technicals as a first AD. But I would like to say that just getting to get the bite of being in the space where I am, I started off a lot more from a self-interest thing, because my first AD work was actually inspired a lot more by a gentleman called Kongambandu, who had been on stage for a while, then he went into film. And once we worked with him once or twice, I got myself working with one of the production companies, a lot more at the film studios, apart from also finding gigs at Blue Sky Films or Sound and Pictures and the like. But then mixing the two, at some point, I decided that I was going to take the risk to leave my accountancy work and then go get into film production and also a bit of theater productions. It sounded like a very risky thing to do. But finally, I found myself where I am, and mixing what I do, what I learned from my accountancy days, then production and being able to be part of the leadership of Mbalamwezi players, then being mentored by Stevie, and then getting myself into leadership of Kenya Film and Television Professionals Association, slowly molded me into becoming the programs director at DocuBox. But lots of what I am today, if I was to talk about it deeply at some point, would be a product of collaboration. It's collaboration between different people, different disciplines, being able to work with the GoDown Center as there was a time when after the post-election violence, I was a moderator of one of the discussions. So all those things were molding me and putting me in one space where my accounts experience, my first AD work, my working with IPAL, Institute of Performing Artists Limited, where I also interacted with Dr. Zippy Okoth. I think it was our first employment. Then my interactions in my earlier times with Cajetan Boy. All this just means that it's important to have an interdisciplinary way of working with people and organizations for you to rise and get to a point where you start understanding the totality of all the skills that you've gathered along the way. That's what I can say.
Thank you, Mudamba. I will be coming back to you, and thanks for mentioning Kongabandu, with whom I worked a little. You know, and I have always thought that he was one of the most amazing people to work with, and I got the impression that you also worked with Steve Mwenesi, and so on. So we did some stuff with Kongabandu at Mukumu Girls many years ago, and he was totally an amazing producer. So I think now we have Zippy. So Zippy, now that you are in town, I want to hear from you about your journey. I mean, and it seems like when you were learning the craft, you also interacted with the Mudamba. So if you could share with us your view about those learning moments. Who mentored you? How did you get into this world of creativity?
I don't know, when I hear Mudamba and Cajetan speaking, I don't know whether mine is now easy or harder. But I think for me, the hardest part of joining this journey was convincing my parents to study theater arts. After that, then I had to come to Nairobi because Nairobi is where the action takes place. And this city was very tough. And then I then met Mudamba at IPAL, Institute of Performing Artists Limited. So Mudamba was basically Mudamba, Mweni Lundi, and Catherine Karuki. Those were, in fact, my very first bosses. Immediately I was from campus. So I was in the right organization, you know, and they really helped to shape my mind to think of theater in a broad aspect, not just performing for the stage, thinking, looking at ERT, you know, those are people or organizations and initiatives we had never heard about, you know. So from there, I started thinking like, this thing is bigger than what I studied, yeah. So for me, theater, I studied it. It was a talent. I studied it. Nowadays, I tell somebody it can't be a hobby because for me, it is my profession. It's not a by the way. In fact, I get angry when people say that thing of yours, you still do that thing. I say it's not a thing. It is theater or it's creative arts, call it something, but not that thing. So, so I worked with IPAL. Then I also worked with Heartstrings Ensemble and Festival of Creative Arts. That is in 2005, 2006. And thereafter, I started my own organization, Silk Theaters, where now we could all do our own work. But a large part of my theater life was also grew up in theater for development. I worked with quite a number of organizations reaching out to communities, and that is way back from Homa Bay. That's where I grew up. So in Homa Bay, we worked with AMREF and WOFAC and PATH. And that time there was these organization called Alternate Waves. I don't know where it went to. Alternate Waves. Yeah, we did a lot of community outreaches with these organizations. From the time I was in Form 2, I was already in this youth group. So my holidays was spent on that. Then I went to Maseno, and anytime during the holiday, I was still involved in these TFDs, reaching out to people, talking about HIV, safe water drinking and that. Then I came to Nairobi and still went on with these in Korogocho, you know, teaching people about reproductive health. And so mixed with education, I think a lot has been about practice. I have learned a lot from practice than I would have learned only in class. And I keep telling, is it the industry or is it my students also? When they say school doesn't teach enough, I say school has never taught enough. School is supposed to ignite your curiosity, and then you go and learn more from the world. So I have learned more and much, much more from the world. And right now, I think I am one of the students of Cajetan Boy when you say you don't have to be good to start, but you have to start to be good. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Zippy. And I was just wondering, as you were speaking, whether Obiobe Rodiambo was, whether you interacted with him as a student. Did you learn from Obiobe Rodiambo?
No, Obiobe Rodiambo was at Moi University, but as we were at Maseno University, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
As we interacted with Otumba Ouko, yes, Wasando Wasambo Were in class most. I think those are the names that people know most in the industry. Yeah.
Wasambo Were, of course, the story of Wasambo Were is something that we really do need to tell rather deeply, because Wasambo Were mentored very, very many people, and not just when he was with the Minister of Education and in charge of the school's drama festivals and so on, but also even post, the ministry, post Jogo House, he really did mentor a lot of people. And I think that we have not appreciated his work enough. I think we need to go back to really looking at his contribution in the industry. Yeah, so great. So I will be coming back to you on some of these questions as we move on. I know that, we talked earlier, I know you are on the road, but it's
Don't
really
worry,
nice.
I'm here.
Okay, fantastic. So I want to get onto another issue, and this is the issue of the benefits, coming out of mentorship. And I want to start this question again with Cajetan. Cajetan, do you think, so when you think about the benefits coming out of mentorship, are those benefits only located for the mentee, or are there also benefits for the mentor? If you could just flesh out a couple of benefits for both sides, that would be very helpful, Cajetan.
Thank you. Well, I would say let me start with maybe the mentor. I would say for the mentor, one of the biggest benefits is seeing somebody you have worked with, somebody who you have led, somebody you have trained, getting into the industry and doing a good job. That in itself is really big satisfaction and very pleasing when you've mentored somebody. There's not much, if any, financial gain from being a mentor. And it's something you basically do because you want to basically share what you know and hope that the craft can improve. The benefit for the mentee is much greater because as a mentee, one, you are learning from a person who has done this and failed in some areas and succeeded in some areas. So you're actually getting some tried and tested knowledge from a person who's actually had their hands in the whole system get involved with the projects. There's also the benefit of, again, depending on the mentee, how the mentee works, is the benefit of networking. Because if you get a good mentor who is well connected, who's been in the industry for a long time, it is easier to open doors for the mentee because the recommendation of certain mentors carries great weight. Another benefit I would say would be, since most mentors, I don't think will have the time or the energy to just mentor anybody, I think there's the added advantage of what I would call bragging rights of being able to say, I was mentored by Miranaya, or I was mentored by so-and-so, some big name. There's an added advantage for the mentee. So I would say by and large, the benefits for mentorship, by and large, tend to fall more on the side of the mentee. If the mentee is well focused and is willing to work hard. For the mentor, as I say, I think the biggest joy for being a mentor is seeing somebody who you have trained, whether they acknowledge you or not, out there doing a good job.
Thank you, Cajetan. It's good to know that both sides tend to benefit from these relationship. If I can go deeper a little bit, in your experience, have you ever mentored someone and then you got disappointed by them?
Yes, I have. I have several instances. There are those who you mentor, and when they get out there, they forget that you mentored them, and they begin acting like they just sprang out of the ground fully grown. That's one group. Another group is those who did very well when you are with them, holding their hand. When they go out there, they forget everything you have taught them. They forget all the values you have tried to instill in them. And the end result is people saying, "Oh, you mean you're mentored by Cajetan? How come? How can you be like this?" Those are the cases I would say is disappointing, are really disappointing. Yeah.
Thank you, Cajetan. Let me come back to Mudamba with the same question, really, on the benefits, really for mentorship. And Mudamba, when you deal with that question, take me all the way to where you have mentorship and whether there are certain gaps that the mentees actually feel in industry. Is there something that they actually add to industry? If you could deal with that. So deal with the benefit for the mentee and the mentor, as well as the benefit for the industry itself.
I would like to actually say that our style of being able to just change and shape the film industry has been to bring in professional mentors, and the professional mentors are very carefully selected by DocuBox. Ideally, what you would end up doing is look to the spaces where there's a lot of experience in terms of filmmaking and documentary films, because documentary films, it was a space we began with. So we look down south to South Africa and then look at West Africa, and we'll find a number of filmmakers, whether it is Jonah Komfra, or if you were to talk about South Africa, with there are 2 or 3 gentlemen that we've worked with. I don't have to keep on mentioning the names, but South Africa, West Africa, and the thing which we tried to do a lot was to look at people who have pride in Africa, people who have gone out and learned the craft and been able to be really skilled filmmakers and have learned from the West, but have a lot of pride in what Africa has to offer and has to give. So when the filmmakers come and they're able to be trained by these mentors, there is a definite jump from what they were to what they're able to do. I'll give you a very simple example. When we began our mentorship programs in 2013, most of our filmmakers would say when they would enter their films or their proposals to film festivals, international film festivals, they would not even receive a regret, leave alone be able to be told how their film fared. If you look 6, 7, and 8 years later, having gone through the mentorship program, a number of these filmmakers have not only been able to double, triple, quadruple the amount of money that we give them at DocuBox to get more funds, but they also have been able to get to a point where their films get to the international level and open at international festivals. Now, what has that done? It has meant that as we work, the one thing that we've been able to do was through the Film Pro series, where we're working with the Film Academy in Baden-Württemberg in Germany, we were able to pair a German professional, whether it's a DOP, whether it's an editor, whether it's a color grader, with a Kenyan DOP editor or color grader to train upcoming filmmakers. And what happens is that at the end, the industry as a whole benefits. It is not just the mentor, the mentee, but the industry as a whole starts seeing a dramatic change and shift from what the filmmakers were able to do years back to what they're able to do today. So I would say one of the major benefits that gets to the filmmaker directly is that they are able to have a teaser, they're able to have a product that they can be able to pitch at the international film festivals and be able to get an eye and even a response, and leave alone a response, but at times financial gain. The person who's coming to the country gets surprised that there are people in the space who have an interesting way of making films. Let me use a simple example. We look at as the way we make films and at times think we are cutting too many corners, what's happening? But when the international filmmaker comes, they are at times totally surprised by the guerrilla filmmaking and the kind of results that we're able to achieve. And they go away with that and say, oh, I could also cut on this and be able to achieve something. So as we professionalize, they are also learning from us as they go away. And a number of times they exchange contacts and they continue working with the students whom they're working with because they see an opportunity of them coming back and going back with something which is important. So the mentor, the mentee, and the industry in itself has gained a lot out of what we've been able to do over the years with the mentorship programs that we've been carrying out, leave alone just as an organization, but at organization to organization, then individual to individual.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, Mudamba, for that. Absolutely, the benefit to the mentee, to the mentor, as well as to the creative sector industry itself. And I want to bring in Dr. Zippy Okoth.
Before you bring in Dr. Zippy Okoth, there was something interesting you asked Cajetan, and I thought you asked him whether he had been disappointed in some of the people they have mentored. Because I came from theater and got into film, then I'm on film administration. without mentioning names, I would tell you that there are people whom we touched at a point where we would call it the packet of chips production, where you are doing a production and the only thing you'll achieve out of that is a packet of chips. You as an actor, because you also started as actors, then went on to become producers. Then at some point, some of these guys became really huge names in the industry. And at times they would even forget where they began. If you ask them, they would say, well, and I'm not talking about Cajetan, please don't misunderstand me. They would start telling you, I started off with James Falkland. They forget that they began with Mbalamwezi at some point. But something else is interesting, that a number of these people became really big names, and some of them are regional directors in organizations. I've been so proud of a number of them that they don't forget where they began. They may be big people at Amref. They may be running their own production and their own production houses. They may be having their own TV shows and the like, but they will always remember it was at Mbalamwezi with Mudamba and Ken Musumba that all this journey began, that without them would not be where we are. And I would say this, some of us would not be where we are without the Kongam Bandus, without the Joy Mboyas of this world, without the Mweni Lundis, without Professor Kimani Njogu. It is something that one must understand. And if you are not appreciative of your beginnings, somebody else will at one point, wonder when because you did not appreciate. When they don't appreciate you, you'll be questioning yourself. But I want to say, I am a product of many hands and many mentors. And I am where I am because people held my hand, and I like to hold people's hands too.
I'm so happy that you brought that up because, as you say, it's very important to remember the journey, mm-hmm. and to remember the people who have touched you, mm-hmm. and to remember that it's not you alone, it's other people who, mm-hmm. it's not your own diligence and your own brilliance, but that other people, really held your hand when things were very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. And that you also have a responsibility of holding that hand. So let me now, and I'll be coming back to Joy, because Joy has done a lot of work in the sector, and I'll be coming back to her to understand what she's hearing from all of you. But before I do that, let's hear from Zippy. And for Zippy, I want you to reflect a little bit about mentorship and whether you notice that there are certain areas that really do require mentorship more than others. Is it possible that there are certain areas within the creative sector that, really, really do need hand-holding, whereas other areas may not require as much hand-holding? And if so, which might those areas be? And the same question I asked Cajetan, whether you've been disappointed by any mentees that you seek to mentor, or whether you have felt very, very proud of some of the mentees that you have held. Zippy.
Let me start by talking about the areas that I think need more mentorship. I think as an industry, we need more mentorship on business of the arts, because a lot of people look at the arts as a hobby, talent, it's a pastime. I can do it later after work, but people need to start thinking how to make money and how to make good money from it. So we need to learn more on fundraising, on marketing, and on the whole business aspect. For me, I think that is the main area. Kenyans, whether it is film, theater, or even visual arts, we have got a great talent, but we are not as rich as we should be, because we are. I don't know whether to say it's because we have not taken it as seriously, or it's because we just don't know how. But I think that's an area that we need to work on. When it comes to mentorship, there's a lot of mentorship going on. Sometimes there's direct mentorship. I always say there's direct mentorship and there is indirect mentorship. Sometimes we learn from people whom we don't even directly interact with. And sometimes we learn from people whom we directly interact with. So that one is there. I have been disappointed sometimes, but when I see a good student of mine doing well, I don't even wait for them to say that they were my student. I shout to the world and say, that was, that was my student. So sometimes I have not been as much disappointed because I do not wait to be acknowledged. I acknowledge my students even before they acknowledge me as the mentor. I acknowledge my mentees even in the programs that I'm working with. And when they do well, I shout more about what they're doing and how I'm so proud of them. So that I think a lot of times I don't even wait for them to say that was my mentor. But I have also been disappointed most by the people you mentor and they never just pick up. There are people you have worked with, and you ask yourself, this one I spent less time and look at where they are. But the people you work with, but they don't pick up. And a lot of times I don't even blame them or even blame myself. I think sometimes that kind of success in something all depends on the attitude. If we keep saying that this industry hakuna kazi, this industry is for failures, this industry you can't make it, then trust me, whether you're mentored by the best, if somebody does not change that attitude, it is hard for them to be successful. So I think being a teacher helps me address that to understand that not everyone you mentor will be successful. Just the same way, even I as a mentee, there are people, I've been mentored by many people, and there are people whose lessons I took in more keenly because maybe of my interest in that area. And there's people whose lessons did not get to my heart as much. And so it's just life.
Yeah.
It's just life, yeah.
It's just life. I mean, I personally, I must tell you that I believe so much in mentorship. I used to put an ad in the Nation, in the daily paper, for a 12-month mentorship program. And out of, say, 200 applications, I would pick one student and just work with that student for 1 year, and then see whether they're able to make a difference in the world. And quite a number actually did make a huge difference. But also, of course, that was now the formal type of mentorship. But we do also have the informal type of mentorship, which we do every day. And I think that what is interesting is that so long as we see benefit both ways, both in terms of the mentee, in terms of the mentor, and in terms of the industry, I think we'll get some sense of satisfaction even when certain mentees do not really satisfy us in terms of their own achievement.
But then, Prof, I must say that having mentors have also helped us a lot. Let me say, as a mentor, having a mentee has helped a lot because one, as much as you are training them, say I have a lot of productions, theater productions, sometimes film productions, and we have the LIP Festival, the Lake International Pan-African Film Festival. And every year we get mentees for the festival and even for our other programs. And one thing I would like to appreciate about them is they are affordable labor. I don't want to say cheap labor. They are also affordable labor, which especially in this industry, it helps a lot in getting someone who's dedicated enough, ready to learn, and you are also able to work with them, but they are able to get instructions and help you around, whether they're coming in as a production manager or as an assistant director. It helps in cutting costs also for us, but also it helps in just looking around and seeing what is the possibilities of using younger people in your work and trusting them with this process. I think it is a test for the person mentoring also, being able to trust younger people to put in their best. And so I think it's been a journey also on that aspect.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zippy. I'll be coming back to you later. I want to shift gears a little bit now and bring in Joy, Joy Mboya. Joy, you have had Cajetan, you have had Mudamba, you have had Zippy. And I would like to hear your reaction to their sentiments about industry, and especially if you could reflect a little bit on the gaps that you see emerging from what their comments, what their comments are giving us, and also if you could reflect a little about the opportunities that exist in the industry for growth through apprenticeship or mentorship or work experience and so forth. Joy. And then I'll bring in Mshai to reflect on a similar question.
No, thank you, Prof. And I'll keep my camera off because I have terrible connection at the office today. So if you don't hear me well, let me know. Can you hear me?
Okay, that's okay. We can hear you well, very well indeed.
Okay, you can hear me. You can hear me fine, Prof.
We can hear you so well. We can hear
okay,
you
excellent.
loud and clear. Yeah.
Sorry, it's because I'm seeing you frozen. No, but thank you so much for the sharing from Cajetan, from Mudamba, from Zippy. In fact, as I listen to them, I am, just reminded of the reality that the growth of any industry really is an aggregate of many efforts. And what we're speaking about particularly, which is now really around mentorship and how people grow and benefit through mentors, I think that as they've all expressed, the journey is not singular, it is interconnected. And it is through these interconnected worlds of support and influence that we really are growing. But what I'm hearing is also just the richness of these life stories and these life cycles and the insights and the lessons they contain and the opportunities that, often slip between our fingers around being able to document these stories. Because I think that when we can patch these stories together, we will get a fuller picture of how all of these sectors are growing and be able to see at a macro level some of the things that we cannot see through the lens of an individual life. So that is one gap that I see as I listen to them. But I also see some of the challenges of journeys. And again, I'm thinking about how do we amplify and even structure certain insights and lessons that seem to sit at particular phases within a journey. So each one has tried to describe some disappointments that they've had, but also some celebrations that they've had around individuals that they've mentored. And I'm just wondering, how do we also share that in a more general way and document that in a more general way around, so sort of core values or insights around different phases, starting out and working with a mentor or working with a mentee, achieving recognition, and then what does that mean? Giving back and preparing to also become a mentor yourself. How do we handle all of these things outside of a life journey? So I think that what I'm seeing is a richness or a tapestry of wonderful stories that of course have brought the sector to where it is, but also how do we consolidate these lessons into something that others can pick up without having had the benefit of the direct relationship with these mentors. But thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Joy. And that is part of the responsibility that we have, the need to continue documenting these journeys and these experiences. Of course, there is value really in terms of systematically doing this so that it's not ad hoc. It's a very systematic way of documenting the industry. And of course, telling the stories of people, documenting the stories of people who have had an impact in the sector and our learning journey itself. So Joy, thank you so much for that intervention. I want to bring in Mshai and again to to share with us, because I also know that she's come in this journey. And if you could just give us an indication of, in your own case, whether you have experienced, mentorship, but I also know that you are a mentor, and also just make a comment about what you are hearing from our colleagues. If you could do that, Mshai, Dr. Mshai.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the opportunity, but also everybody who has spoken, because I agree with Joy. Everything they have shared together is so rich. I was taking notes and just thinking about, I teach a class on mentoring at the African Leadership Center when I'm wearing my academic hat. And I was just like, I'm going to be using this insight and maybe even this video when it's out as a way of opening up our discussion, because I think everything that was said was so rich. So thank you, everyone. And yes, I have been mentored. I have come to a place in life where I believe that at any one point, well, there are seasons. Everybody has a season where sometimes you just need space out from everything. But I think when you're not in a season, that everybody should be mentoring and everybody should be mentored. And I just want to say how much I appreciated the point that was made by Zippy, that when she was talking about how at different life stages, I think it was, and how we all come to a part in life where there's something to give and there's something to get, and the mentors are also getting something out of the process. Because I think often when you're mentoring, it can feel very draining. It can be very frustrating, as people have said, you give a lot, but I think it's important. I know in the opportunities when I have mentored, I have learned so much. And like you mentioned this, and I really appreciated that. I've become very deliberate in choosing who I am going into a mentoring relationship with, because it's important for me that the mentee also appreciates and understands what they're giving me, so that it's not seen as a one-way trip. Like I'm the only one who's pouring into them. And it's always a delight to see how much I can learn from people who, at first glance, they may have thought that they were the only ones who are receiving from me. In storytelling, I'm still being mentored by someone like Trina Mhlope, who's a South African storyteller who I met at a very formative time in my life. I had just left university. I was trying to figure myself out. I thought of myself as a theater, primarily actress and director. And then she just introduced me and opened me up to storytelling, and has been consistent over the decades in not only pulling me into storytelling places, opening up things to me, challenging me, and so on. In theater, I grew up both with the Creative and Performing Arts Center in KU that taught me to do peer mentoring, but theater workshop productions, which I was a member straight after I left KU. Mudamba was at Mbalamwezi at the time, and we used to also learn a lot from each other with Mbalamwezi, Friends Theater, Chelepe. There were a group of us where we also deliberately came together because each of those groups had a specific focus. So we would be learning from each other even as we were learning within our own groups. And to this day, even the collective I belong to, the Oricha Collective, we consider ourselves to be peer mentoring each other. Joy knows that I'm always coming to Joy and telling her, Joy, I want you to mentor me in very specific ways. So I have been mentored and I seek to mentor. Some of the things I heard that was so useful for me for my reflection, therefore, was that all of us need to either be mentored or to be mentoring. You're never too young to mentor, and you're never too old. That sometimes we think, I'm so young, I can't mentor everything. And in my classes, what we do is we start by identifying one person you could be mentoring, right? And my favorite story was somebody who told me of this little boy who, when she graduated from her B.Ed, her first degree, this little boy who was in nursery school followed her around, those flowers that they put around the neck. And he kept saying, I want to be like you one day. And so she made it her job to, imagine starting to mentor a 6-year-old. So everybody can mentor. I think the second thing I had from them was just the diversity of ways. Because I think often we think mentoring only can happen in one way. And I've mentioned some of them, but listening to each of them, they had so many multiple examples from one-on-one mentoring. Cajetan talked about James Falkland, specifically mentoring him to write. But then let's say as you go down, Mudamba, Zippy, they mentioned spaces they had been, collectives of people, you know, IPAL, I was at IPAL and here are the people and they were doing this and this mentored me. So I really appreciated that, because I think often people get disillusioned with a space or with one person and then run away and say, you know, mentoring is not good, it's exploitative, or whatever our issues are. And I think what I heard from them is that you can always find a space that meets your need. I think the third thing I heard from them was the need to be very specific and deliberate in knowing what is it that I can get out of a mentoring relationship. So Zippy, for example, said, in this space, I learned about theater for development, right? Mudamba said, when we bring in our, you know, the people who we've created a specific program for, we are looking for specific things. And I think it's really useful when you understand what is it I want from a particular mentor or mentoring program. And then the fourth thing I heard was really to be very deliberate in answering all the W's, not only where am I going, but I have learned, like I said, and I think, Prof, you made that point where you said you advertise, but you pick one student, right? And that's a blend of where the mentor is and where the mentee is, what that mentor is able to offer. Because I think my biggest mistakes in mentoring was when I was much younger and I just, you know, would go to someone and say, Joy, I want you to mentor me. And Joy is like, in what precisely? What is it that I can offer you? And I think when you're very deliberate, the mentor knows what things they are mentoring in, and the mentee knows what they're looking for. And I have learned that for some people, I say to them, I'm not the best mentor for what you want me to mentor you for. Or at this space of time, you would be better off with somebody else. And I think when we're very deliberate about the who, the whom, the where are we mentoring, how are we mentoring, what am I getting out of this, what am I giving you, I think we're more likely to have a more specific, a more successful. So I really appreciated, like Joy right now set out and said, this is what we need. This is where we need to look at. I think Zippy did that. So for me, all of that was very rich. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mshai, as usual, for very incisive and precise intervention. I want to, as we get to the end of our conversation, to pose another question, which is really, the responsibility of the mentor to the mentee, and the responsibility of the mentee to the mentor. Because these are two people who are doing something that is the end product is actually jointly valuable. It's valuable both ways. But what are the responsibilities? What's the responsibility of each one of them? If you could just mention a few of these, maybe Mudamba, we could start with you in terms of what do you consider to be the responsibility of the mentee to the mentor, and vice versa, and especially also when you think in terms of the age difference and so on.
Okay, I want to answer that question in two ways. I want to answer that question on the individual, and I also want to answer it on the organizational level. I hope you can agree for me to take that approach. And before I get there, I also would like to just first of all celebrate what Joy spoke about how mentorship had been and was used. And I think Prof. Mshai also talked about organization to organization, whether it's Balamwezi to theater workshop productions. And when I look at the present stage, I also remember quite well how the pace of growth of the mentee ended up becoming so fast, especially when it came to film production, when a professional filmmaker comes to mentor an upcoming filmmaker. the kind of dramatic growth that happens, and where a person will tell you, this I would have taken 3 years to get, and I got it in a week or 10 days. I can't believe it. That is an important one. So I want to just first of all to get there. Then when I talk about the responsibility of the mentor to the mentee, and the mentee to the mentor, I think it's a bit answered in what I've already mentioned. That when you seek to be a mentee, to be mentored by somebody, you are seeking to either become like or bigger than. So when I go to Professor Kimani Njogu and I say, I want you to mentor me in this direction, the reason why I've gone to Kimani Njogu is because I like Kimani Njogu's style. I like what he does, and I like his leadership style, and I want to learn from the best on the particular direction. And that's why I think even Mshai says, be very specific. Don't go to Professor Kimani Njogu and just tell him, I want to be like you. In what manner? Do you want to be like him in the scripts he writes? Do you want to be like him in the leadership skills that he has? Be specific, so that when you are seeking to understand and to learn from this person, the person knows ni makali gani unataka. What kind of knife do you want to cut what? Because then they will specifically go to that area and that direction to be able to sharpen you. But at the same time, as you are learning from the mentor, I think the mentor must understand that there's a responsibility that they have bigger than this individual, because the individual comes with needs and wants for his personal growth. But I think at the same time, as you come with your wants and needs for your personal growth, you are also coming with wants and needs for the whole industry and the whole space. And that's why I go to the next level, where I talk about not just thinking about this actor or actress, and not understanding that this person who is Zippy is not just an actor, actress. At some point, she could become an institution. At some point, she could shift the way people think on stage and on screen because of what she does. So plant that, knowing that you are not affecting just an individual. So organization to organization, there's supposed to be also mentorship between organization to organization. And I want to remind Joy that at some point when Balamwezi was having a bit of trouble, we would go to the GoDown Center and say, these are our needs. And interestingly, Joy, I don't know whether she was doing it deliberately or not, but she brought in programs into the country where theater artists, dancers were being mentored and trained on money matters, on stagecraft, on dance and movement, and that became something very important. So as for her, she was doing it as an institution to individuals. But as for us as institutions, we are learning from an institution what to also do with other institutions. And I'll go to finally what I might have shared in one or another. For DocuBox to be where it is, it has had to mirror itself with other organizations that are doing much better. I'll give an example, and I hope it won't look far-fetched. The organization called the Doc Society in the UK, we had to go and shadow Doc Society to just understand, how do we work? How do we create systems that will work in our industry and our space? How do we bring in budgets and trackers and all that, so that we are not groping in the dark, trying to assume, while we are trying to reinvent the wheel and others have already worked and been able to. So what am I saying in conclusion? Organizations must also get to a point where they want to mentor others. We want to work with the nest and be able to learn something from the nest because they are good in particular ways. Somebody else wants to learn from DocuBox because they understand DocuBox has something about what they do. A theater group, whether it is friends, going to check on what Heartstrings is doing, is important that they learn together. So it must get from individual even to organization. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, you have. It's individual. We have to have individual, organization to organization, intra-sector, you know, the sectors learning from each other, including actually intra or inter subsector, so that filmmakers are learning from filmmakers, and so forth and so on. So really across the board. And I'm really happy that you mentioned docu-society for, you know, the fact that you are able to shadow them and to be able to see how they are working, so that you can actually bring in the skill to our zone, to our region. So thanks a lot, Mudamba. I want to bring in Cajetan to just again reflect a little bit about the responsibility, but also to build on the idea about the gaps, because we have had at least the gaps related to business skills, we have had gaps related to documentation, and so on. From where you sit, Cajetan, what are the responsibilities and what are the gaps that that you see in terms of the sector and mentorship? We will need to unmute Cajetan. I don't know whether Cajetan is having trouble unmuting. Maybe Zippy, you can respond to that question as we try to bring in Cajetan. Zippy?
Hi. Yes. Just to get your questions right, you are asking.
Yes, so I'm asking two things. One, I mean, you did talk about the mentorship gaps, and you talked about business, and Joy brought in documentation, that there are those, so that we need to build a knowledge around how you mentor and so forth and so on. If you could build a little bit on those gaps, on those areas that we need to invest in, and also if you could reflect a little bit, just a little bit, about the responsibilities both ways. And in your case, especially if you could also bring in the issue of gender and sensitivities, that would be very helpful.
There are a lot of gaps, of course, in that there's never a streamlined way of one picking how to people to mentor, and even like how to mentor people. So everyone does it their style. So we can't say that's a gap. I think that one is an opportunity. But one thing that I can say, like I always look for in mentors, is people of integrity. Integrity for me is everything, and discipline. If you say you'll do it, do it. If you can't do it, say I can't do it, show me. You get what I mean? And if you say you'll make it at this time, say I'll make it at this time. If you can't make it, say I can't make it. Because sometimes you have an intern and they tell you I'll be there the whole week, I'm available full time. Then you tell them, okay, I don't need you every day. I only need you 3 times a week unless we have a project going on that week. So I only need you like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Then Wednesday, somebody tells you, oh, this Wednesday I'm not able to. Then I'm like, when you are committing, you said this, you know. So I want somebody who's very honest, somebody who's very disciplined. And even if they can't do something, they are very open to learning and sharing that they can't do it. I think for me, that one is a great motivation. And self-driven. And how I look at self-driven is, I think from where I come from, I did a lot of volunteer work. And this is a non-paid volunteer work. And that's the same thing I always look for. I always ask, I'm looking for volunteers, I'm looking for interns who will be with us for like 6 months or 3 months, and it is not going to be paid. Even though, I mean, during the program, we always pay people their allowance and any cost. They don't incur any cost for the program, but to give them their allowances or so. But I do not want somebody's motivation to join our internship or mentorship to be money. I want it to be that it's because they wanted to be part of this. So even if we pay them something in the end, it should not be the main motivation. So we always tell them it's not, we are not paying. Because of course, anyway, it's not even payment. It's an allowance what we pay. It's not payment. So those are things we look for. And one thing I expect, I need to give a mentee is a selflessness, selfless, like give them information as they need, and invite them for opportunities, because sometimes we may not think that a particular event is an opportunity for a young person, but when you go along with them, you tell them, let's go together to this event, it opens their mind to great opportunities, meeting new people, seeing how things are done, seeing how, coming to an event and meeting Joy, meeting Mshai Mwangola, meeting, Prof. It opens the mind of the young person to many, many possibilities. And sometimes they say, I may not even know how to mentor, but I try to give what I was given. I think I've always been lucky. I've always gotten people, always been very open and shared opportunities, taken me places to meet people. And it has made me be able to know how to interact with people at a certain level. And so that's what I also try to give the people whose hand I hold. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I like that. I like the, integrity, discipline, self-drive, really openness, selflessness, really the idea that the mentee sees this as an opportunity, and the mentor also sees this as an opportunity. I can see that Cajetan is still trying to come on board, but before he does, Joy, if you can, if you were to make a general reflection, because now we are coming to the end of our conversation, about how else we can strengthen, especially the inter-organizational, mentorship. I mean, we've talked about the individual to individual mentorship. We have seen the responsibilities. What about, between organizations in the creative sector? What are the responsibilities? What are the challenges, really, about, for example, an organization such as, or an institution such as the GoDown, picking a very small organization to mentor? What are the opportunities and what are the challenges of that relationship, Joy? And if you could just make that and round it up for us in terms of your general reflection, that would be very helpful. Then I'll come back to Mshai for her last kind of remarks.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. Thank you very much, Mudamba, for raising the organization to organization mentorship. I think that is really important, because we know that there is no formal training for professionals, particularly who will run organizations, who will run programs. And often, if you can mentor each other across institutions, I think that is a strong way of learning. In fact, as Mudamba was speaking, I recall that very early on, we had a relationship with two organizations in Zanzibar who we sort of worked together with in terms of trying to build the capacity of some of our own staff, a mentorship that was happening around some young people who wanted to be engineers and wanted to be documentalists. And so we partnered with the Dar Music Academy then, many years ago, and the Busara Music Festival as well, then, many years ago, to try and see how within their spaces of programming, over a period of 3 months or 6 months, or for a shorter festival window of about 10 days, a learning and a mentorship and a support could happen across the institutions. So I think that this is one way of structuring this idea of mentorship at the organizational level. And then again, I reflect back on how we have been able to acquire some of our staff. And this was beginning to build a relationship with USIU, particularly students from the communications department. Every year, their lecturers would come to us and say, we have these 3 students. You might wish to interview them and maybe pick one of them to be with you for a year. And we did that continuously for about 6 years. And actually, 3 of our staff, 2 have since left, but 1 still with us, have come out of that particular program. So I think that these are really important ways of peer-to-peer. But now that we are also getting institutions that are older, you know, the GoDown is approaching 20 years. Some of the organizations that are sitting here are 10 years plus. I think there's probably a space that we can develop around CEO to CEO mentorship and support, and to try and see how we discuss this question of sustaining institutions and mentoring institutions at that particular level. So I think that that for me is really the next stage of the development of our sector generally, is that we're moving from individual capacities to institutional capacities, and therefore sharing that enables a collective and sector level capacity strengthening and growing.
Thanks, Joy. And really, this is what we are doing in these creative economy working group learnings. I mean, we are trying to help each other become better. So imparting skills, really, helping each other, functioning quickly also as points of reference. I mean, there are moments when you need a reference letter rather quickly, and you rush to your fellow institution for that level of support. So I think this is really important, and that's the whole essence of networks and so on, so that we are learning institutions, we are learning networks. And just also to mention that even at Twaweza, we used to have a mentorship program with the School of Journalism at the University of Nairobi, as well as Daystar. That is, and many of the students that went through our hands, some of them actually now teaching in the university because they learned that it is actually possible. At least 3 of them that were passed through my hands as mentees have PhDs, because we created opportunities for them to get scholarships, and they discovered that they were actually trainers. They had never thought of themselves as capable of teaching in the university, and they are now teaching in the university. They learned that it's actually possible, and it is true that this is a gift that we have to give to each other and also to the country. I want to bring in Dr. Mshai to again address the question of safe spaces, and especially because mentorship sometimes requires very close working relationship. How do we create the safe spaces for the mentee and for the mentor? And especially if, Dr. Mshai, you can also reflect on the whole question of gender, and how that gets navigated to ensure that the learning is smooth and easy, and that it's not, it's not difficult on any of the parties involved. Dr. Mshai, if you can step in, and Cajetan will bring you back on the question of the gaps in a moment. Dr. Mshai.
Thank you very much, Prof, and thank you for that question, because I think it's a very important question. And I just want to, I really appreciate the question you asked, Mudamba, in terms of what is it that we can, what does a mentoring space and relationship, what are some of the things that we can bring in? And I think for me, number one, it is that thing of a safe space for people to explore and to grow. And to ask what I think when we talk about what is it that the mentor owes the mentee and the mentee owes the mentor, I think one thing is respect, and the other thing is responsibility. And I think we've discussed responsibility, but I just wanted to say a couple of things in terms of respect. And one, it is that I am always in awe of how much it takes to mentor somebody. Just the burden of time. So anytime I'm asking someone to mentor me, I try to be very thoughtful about they're giving me their time, they're opening up their contacts, they're making spaces and opportunities. Zippy talked about saying people are giving you free labor, but you're also opening up and creating spaces for them to grow. So I think being aware of that is really important. And one of the things that I have learned to do is a kind of a mentoring contract that allows people to think through these issues before the relationship starts, so that you don't go into gray areas. But I really want to talk about the question of boundaries, because I think it's very easy, both for the mentor and for the mentee, to abuse the boundaries, especially as your relationship grows. And earlier on, I had mentioned doing a contract with the W's, so the who, the whom, but I think the questions of where, the questions of when, the questions of how are equally important. And this is because we as human beings, we are human beings who are social creatures, and we've all been mentored differently. We come in different bodies. And I know that when I go, wherever I go, I come in as a woman. I come in as a woman of a particular age, a woman who comes in with a particular culture, perhaps a faith background, and all sorts of, that's who I am. And creating a space as a mentor that allows my mentee to be in that space with all comfort possible, I think is very important. So one of the things I learned very early, especially when I'm in a relationship, either as a mentee or a mentor with somebody of another gender, is to make sure that we are agreed on at what times and at what spaces this intimate relationship of growth occurs. People, and I want to call out some of the people who taught me these lessons and crafted it well. When I was in college, people like David Mulwa, who pulled out two of us as students when he was doing the play Redemption. It was an assignment he was doing out of the university. We would go with him from campus and go into rehearsal. And Mulwa was very careful in protecting us from what was going on in the space. So people would come in with alcohol, guys, and all sorts of things were happening. But Mulwa was very protective of us, right? Francis Imbuga, Mumbiwa Maina, we would go off as young students doing assignments when it was, adjudicating. So you're going for a week and you're with all these, your fellow adjudicators, and people will try to cross all sorts of boundaries, try to get you drinking, all sorts of relationships, intimate relationships. And I saw young people being drawn into relationships that they didn't know how to get out of. So setting up those boundaries ahead of time and finding people who, if they're under their wing, one thing I really appreciated was the people who are mentoring me being the ones to say, no, she will not come to that. That's happening too late. How is she going to get there? How is she going to get out? No, after this time, we're not going to work. I'm not going to require you to do that or to do certain things. I want to say this also to respect people in terms of their faith. So people from different faith spaces or from different cultural backgrounds may or may not be able to do or be in certain spaces. And I think especially in the arts, and I come from theater, we often are comfortable in spaces and doing things in terms of exercises and the way that we work that don't always respect those boundaries. And I think as we are growing people, to constantly ask ourselves, am I creating, is this a safe space? And then also building into our mentoring relationships at the beginning, what is how do we talk about things that you're not comfortable? And not comfortable doesn't mean I've crossed a boundary. It could be as simple as I, as a teacher who's female, closing the door when a male student comes to speak to me about something. He may be uncomfortable, but doesn't know how to raise it. So starting by thinking it through and saying, when you're in my office, the door will not be closed. Not because of anything, but because it immediately creates a boundary, a safe space for that person to be. And each relationship will be different. I say do it ahead of time so that the issues don't come up as they're going on. And then the other thing I wanted to speak to is also being careful about things like money, right? So somebody is mentoring me. I know Professor Kimani Njogu, obviously he's a professor, he's very rich. I am his student. So I expect certain things until a point where it becomes uncomfortable, because whatever I think of him, he has a lot of responsibilities. And there's a very uncomfortable thing that comes when money comes into the question. I'm not saying you cannot buy a cup of coffee for your mentor. or buy them a gift. I'm just saying, being very careful that we set up mentoring relationships, especially when they're individual. I think when they're institutional, or it's a program, or it's a peer mentoring situation, it's a much easier space to do it. But when you're navigating one-on-one, I am forever grateful that the people who have mentored me have never put me in a situation where I was uncomfortable, but I have seen it happen enough times for me to know that it's my responsibility as a mentor to craft the situation, and also as a mentee to practice ahead of time. What will I need to do if I need to just say, listen, I'm not comfortable, and can I, I'm okay with this. This specific thing is the one that I'm not comfortable with. And this is why. It's about me, not about offending the other person. It's just what your own personal boundaries are. Thank you, Prof.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Mshai, for that. Very, very important. The question of where, very, very important. And I want Dr. Zippy Okoth, can you make a comment about that briefly before we bring in Cajetan on the question of the gaps, please, of the where, the question of the where.
Yeah, I think Mshai has touched on that very important part, because the question of where is a very important question that a lot of mentees don't ask because they are shy, they don't want to lose the opportunity. And some mentors also do not want to create that space. And this is sometimes I say it's very important as a mentor that it do not matter the age of the person, take it that the mentee is your child. Whether the mentee is older than you, take it that like they're your child. So what is it that you can do to your child? What is it that you'd expect of a child? Because telling someone like, okay, let's meet at the club, this is a mentee, the space in itself does not feel safe. Somebody asks themselves, okay, if they see me with this person, what will people think? And you see, the mentee does not want to be in that kind of space of worrying about what people will think of them and stuff like that. And also right now, to be honest, there are a lot of cases of rape that have increased, both for men and women. And so having somebody to come to your house, somebody needs to know, are you a family person? Will your wife be there so that they can feel safe? At least there's another woman. But if you're a single man and this is a single lady coming to your house, it is not safe. It is not safe for the girl. Even if you don't have good intentions, even if you had not thought of anything, it is not safe in that it can create room for things that nobody else expected, So it is very important to think of the where and even the time. Unless, let me say, like for theater, we have got shows that are happening at night. You have a premiere that's going on till 8 or so. Then you can say, okay, today we have an event that's going to go on until this time. But if it is a younger person, call the parents. I always take the initiative to call parents if I'm working with someone below the age of 2021 and tell them we are having this and it's going to end at this time, and we'll put them in a taxi so they should be home by 10 or so. Or if the person is coming from too far, I say, I'm going to sleep with this person. They're going to spend in my house, and tomorrow they will be able to come. That because if you're having a show in town and you have an intern who lives in Kitengela, say, it is not safe for whatever cost, even if your show ends at 9 or 10. So let these youth go and pan a mat and whatever. It's better you just say, today you'll spend in my house. I'm a family person. I have my children. Tomorrow you will go and you tell the parents like that. I think it's important to take note of that. And if the person is older, it does not matter. Even older people need a safe space, just to know that where I am with this person, people are not thinking that I am the sugar daddy or sugar mommy of this lady or young man. They need to have that sense of psychological safety also, yes.
So it's the question of the duty of care that we have to have to care for the other party and their feelings.
Yes.
And the sensitivity, as well as even perceptions, because
yes.
Even when nothing is going on, even when one is not being exploitative, there could be perceptions that actually there is exploitation taking place, and that can have a very devastating effect on the learning and so on. So in other words, what I'm hearing from all of you is that one must be very deliberate in terms of, of dealing with the 5 W's and so on that Dr. Mshai brought up. You know, who am I mentoring? Why am I mentoring them? Where am I mentoring them? When is the mentorship taking place? So why, you know, so what? You know, why am I doing all that? So why should I care, you know, about this and so forth and so on. So these are important comments that that you have. I want to transition rather quickly to Cajetan. If you could just do a gap, and I'll give each one of you exactly 1 minute to say like closing comments, and then we'll transition to another matter. Cajetan, gaps for you, and as you do the gaps, do your 1 minute closing comment.
Yes, well, the gap is that there's a perceived, in some areas, there's a perception that academia and practitioners don't get along, and that they are in competition with each other. I think that actually diminishes the effectiveness of both the practitioners and their academicians. Another gap is Kenyans have got a thing about certification and papers. I'm always being asked, after you mentor me, will you give me a certificate? Can I use it to get a job? I think, again, that is a gap that people need to realize, that mentorship that will not get you a certificate like a NEC certificate, but rather it is something that is supposed to help you maybe if you're to move into the more formal area of pursuing your craft. That's about it. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Cajetan. Yes, I know the suspicion between academia and practice is a long one, and I recall when we organized a conversation between you know, academia and practice. Many of the people in practice asked me, Kimani, are there other people like the ones you have just brought to this meeting? Because we had always been very suspicious of people who are in academia. I mean, the two worlds need to work together. They need to interact more. I think that is going to be more enriching to the sector. Mudamba, your 1 minute or so.
I just want to close by saying that this has been a very enriching conversation, but much more also just to thank Dr. Mshai for what she brought in on the where and when, and the safe spaces, because I want to think that for a mentorship to really thrive, the word trust must become a capital letter word in this space, so that the mentee is fully trusting of the mentor, and the mentor understands that there is a fragility between him as a mentor or her as a mentor and the mentee. The mentee will always feel small because they are standing before a giant in their own way. And I think Dr. Zippy has said it very, very well, that even for the mentor, if you end up being in that space where you are also psychologically feeling like being with this person where I am, people may think I'm a sugar daddy, then be careful of the where and when. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Asante.
Thanks, Mudamba. Dr. Mshai, 1 minute or so.
Thank you. And I just thank you for the opportunity to inspire us and remind us why mentoring is important. And I just wanted to add that we've talked a lot about mentoring from a professional point of view, but I would also encourage people that there are times in life you also need a personal mentor who just helps you out with what's going on in your other space. And you can even have two different mentors working with you at a different time, because we come in as human beings. And it is absolutely fine to say that while I want to grow as a theater artist, or I want to learn how to be a better advocate or anything else, that I also take care of myself as a human being, because ultimately that is what it will come into our professional spaces. So let's also look for professional as well as personal mentors. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mshai. As usual, yes, the personal mentors also just for inner growth and so on, and just somewhere you can bounce ideas and also just the type of support that you require. Sometimes it's just emotional support, and that emotional support needs a place where it can be gotten. Again, very deliberate, very, very deliberate, and also just to be careful how we choose our mentors. Zippy, 1 minute.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for this moment to talk about this. What I can just say is that we should all be very intentional, and we should increase our scope in terms of the people we reach out to. And I always say there are no coincidences in life. The people you meet when you are younger, who hold your hand, whom you look up to, you end up meeting them even way later in life. If I look back, I met people like Akina Joy, Mboya, and Mudamba 20 years ago, but now we are still working together with them. So there are no coincidences. Always learn from every opportunity. Yeah.
Joy, 1 minute.
No, actually, I think everybody has spoken very well indeed. I mean, thank you, I think, for this really edifying exchange and conversation. And I know we've been discussing gaps, and I think that there is a good account of some of what those gaps are. I think there's also now an appreciation, really, in a sort of a structured way around the mentor and the mentee, both at person to person, but also institution or organization to organization. And it would be great to see how the next level of a conversation like this begins to sort of yield something where we have practical things that we can take away from this. So I, for example, as the GoDown, very keen to look at this idea of organization to organization mentorship, but across institutions that are based right here in Nairobi, and of course in some of the out of capital cities. So this, I think, has been a wonderful, wonderful reflection.
Yeah, because the organization to organization really again contributes to our sustainability as a sector, as well as actually our own organization. So we become learning organizations, holding each other. Also, even just handing over things that we can't do because other people can actually do those, and we have mentored them to a level that we have faith that they can actually deliver those other, responsibilities. So I really want to thank all of you for a very, very nice conversation.